Is there like an intro?
No, there isn't an intro.
No.
How do they intro in the podcast that you want to talk about but shall not be named?
I know that they talk about like the production company and then just like a brief
riddle
intro.
They'll do. How does he do it?
Greetings,
Greetings, dear listeners.
Yeah, they do that.
Is that someone like? Is that one of the three of them, or is it?
I
think it's a Wood Elf production specific guy.
I feel like that's...
Who owns Wood Elf Productions?
I don't know.
Wood Elf.
Yeah, the guy that makes like what's that cookie company?
Yeah, I was about to
The
say.
Keebler?
Yeah.
The
Honor, you
Keebler
make it
elves.
really hard not to say f*** you. You make it so difficult.
That's what I'm here for.
Welcome to Podpodcastcast. I'm Sam,
I'm Honor.
and today we're joined by a mediocre guest. You know,
Mediocre.
So rude.
Rude.
We're joined by Carly.
Carly.
I love Carly.
Hey.
Carly, we're so glad you're here. We're so glad. Carly, for those who don't know, is on our podcast.
I am on the
Yeah.
podcast.
And nowhere else.
Nowhere
No.
else.
Is that right?
I was
No.
just pulled off the streets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, well, clearly because I don't think you have much knowledge of this podcast.
Oh, definitely not.
Honor, do you listen to... not Honor. Honor, I'm not talking to you.
Okay.
Carly.
Vanished.
Carly, are you big podhead? Are you a big podcast person? Because our last guest... Sorry to talk about our exes here, but our last guest, Brady from the YouTube channel Bradius, came on our podcast. He said, Sam, he said, Honor, I love podcasts.
Wow.
I'm the biggest podcast fan in the world. And
He said that to us.
That's what he said. Isn't that what
Yeah.
he said, Honor?
He applied to be on the podcast, and he was like, I'm qualified, and
Right.
I listen to so many podcasts.
Yes,
Wow.
he sent us his LinkedIn.
Yeah.
He gave us.
sent a
He gave us.
LinkedIn?
He had a
It
cover
said
letter.
podcast. That was his job, was podcast.
He's
Oh, I came really unprepared.
yeah, and then I hope you're better because he came in and then he said, "Oops, I don't actually listen to that many podcasts."
What?
Kaylee? Okay, not kid. Carly,
Can't even get my name right.
person.
Yeah.
Can you the first person, our first guest on this podcast review podcast?
Yeah.
And they don't listen to podcasts.
I'm not that.
You're not that. You
No.
like podcasts. You're a podhead.
Yeah,
Probably listen to
I
podcasts.
feel like it's split in between like music and podcasts,
Mm.
but I prefer like podcasts for homework.
Wait, what?
I
You-
get good guests.
That's crazy to listen to podcasts while you do homework.
Yeah, I've gotten really good
It's
at it.
words on words. You can't. That's
I live with 5 other people, so I've gotten really used to it.
that's
It wasn't like an original thing. That's this semester like new
a new development.
new development.
Oh,
Yeah.
my condolences.
Yeah, I learned how to do homework while listening to all 3 Hunger Games movies. There are 4, but now there are 3. And then Divergent.
Are you rooming with a bunch of tweens?
I mean, they probably fit the description.
Of what? I hope that.
They listen. Okay.
What if we just review Carly's roommates as a
I'm
podcast?
giving them 0 pods right now because
I
they clearly
mean-
haven't advanced beyond not YA novels, but movies about YA novels,
I
which
mean,
is worse.
Guess what they read? YA novels.
God bless.
They are big Sarah J. Maas fans.
I don't know who that is. I think they must be
I
more
don't
cultured than
know.
me.
It's like the A Court of Thorns and Roses, and then
Is that
Throne of Glass.
Game
I
of,
see, I
Game
see.
of Thrones?
No,
No.
there's less killing.
It's
As much
like
as they'll try and tell you that
Boo.
there's a lot of killing,
Boo.
it's like there's like a ton of romance and sex, and I was like, there's no way. There's no way,
It's yet another fairy tale spin-off series.
and it's mediocre.
There's a lot of mediocre
It's
ones
quote
out
unquote
there.
girl power, but it's like not.
Speaking of
No.
mediocre, Honor, what podcast did you bring to this round table?
This is actually
I was not ready for the bullying.
this is actually a very good segue
Thank you.
because
I knew.
the podcast I'm going to talk about today, speaking of fairy tales, is called Fairy. This is a podcast I wish I'd liked.
Ooh, I'm so interested.
But it was bad. It was really bad. It's a podcast called Fairy. Notably, it is spelled Faerie.
Oh, I feel like I've seen it.
You probably have. It's a Spotify original, which means it gets advertised to
Yes.
hell and back
Mhm.
Awesome.
on Spotify. And so, it popped up, and there will be a larger discussion about the podcast studio
Mhm.
that is behind this podcast and is behind another podcast I've listened to. My ratings of them are connected.
What is the studio?
The studio.
That was such a deep sigh.
Is it the Public Radio Alliance? I think it is.
Which is not the National Public Radio, NPR.
No.
Yeah, no, not of great fame.
Yes.
No.
This is of much less fame.
Much
Yeah.
less.
The younger cousin. if
I
you
think
will.
it's also maybe technically like a thing two studios do. I think it's the Public Radio Alliance. You almost made me say NPR. And another studio, which is the one I can't remember the name of,
Okay.
which is why I was like, oh, shoot. So, to set the scene, they do this thing where, the Public Radio Alliance, that sounds like nonfiction. That sounds like we
Sure.
would do radio shows, not necessarily podcasts. This should be your sign.
Red flag number 1.
Not even necessarily a red flag, but it is a flag.
Beige.
Take note, and you'll figure out what color it is.
Beige flag. Okay. It's like air traffic control. I don't know what this is, but
Yeah.
it's not checking.
Yeah.
I just really know what is it? Vexology? That's the
Huh?
study of flags. I was on r//vexology one time.
Nerd.
Dude, I didn't even know that.
Sam's a nerd. Yeah, so the tone of the podcast is it's one of those podcasts where they make it sound like it's real. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like, the main narrator of the story, if I recall correctly, like, the actor's real name is the name of the character. This is an actual employee of the actual Public
Company.
Radio Alliance. And the
Okay.
premise of the podcast is that, like, it is this character making this podcast for Public Radio Alliance. This is kind of the thing they do.
But is it fiction?
It is fiction.
Okay.
Oh, so is it like that situation in the 60s before, like, when they were claiming that aliens were, like, invading Earth?
No, that's a
War of the
different thing.
Worlds, but
War of the
no,
Worlds,
yeah.
they weren't claiming that was nonfiction. It just, because no one had done fiction on radio
Yeah.
at that point, so no one knew.
Yeah, it was.
They just weren't disclosing it every 5 minutes.
Yeah, it was the turn of the century. People would just tune in. They'd be like, "Oh my god!"
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, the aliens are coming.
No, that's a whole thing I've studied in multiple of my classes. But no, it is like very much like you look at the description, it says fiction, and also the like opening premise of the podcast is that fairies are real and there's a secret branch of the government that is dedicated to like keeping them safe and stuff.
This sounds.
This sounds like a
Awful.
Facebook bomb.
It sounds like the
It's-
all the parts of Harry Potter that really annoy me.
Yeah, it's bad.
Does the government spell fairy wrong, or does the podcaster do that? Whose fault is
I'm
it?
pretty
that
sure that's
Well,
the
okay.
Celtic spelling.
Yeah, there's
well, but
different.
whoever
spellings.
listened to the Celtic people? Okay,
That's the
come
thing.
on.
That's the thing. Is there's been. I'm a person who likes fairies and like fae folklore. I like that kind of stuff. So I
And-
was like,
And we don't hold that
interested.
against you.
Yeah, no. That's cool.
You said that like it was a question, Sam. Are you holding it against me, Sam?
Listener, you should have said that brief pause was punctuated by a face of, do I even respond? Do I even
That was
lash
funny.
out in the anger that this has caused me?
That was the like look of like not quite defeat, but it's like I'm not even gonna.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought
is it-
about not saying anything, and then I did. I like fae stuff. It can be cool.
It's the inner D&D in you.
Sure. I actually think I like Fae more than D&D specifically. I wish D&D had more Fae. This is my gripe with D&D is that the stuff they have for Fae is weak. It's weak sauce.
It's not interesting.
There's nothing there.
I'm gonna come.
They're like, they're sprites.
I'm gonna come out and say that is Fae folklore in general. As someone who doesn't know anything about it, I'm gonna say it's weak in general.
You're wrong.
They have bad stats. Not interesting plane to visit.
You know,
it's the
boring,
bad stats.
Boring folklore, boring mythology. There are better ones.
No, okay, so here's the thing.
Anti-Fae Alliance.
Yeah.
That's our podcast studio.
Nice.
Suck it, Wood Elf.
Oh, yeah. It's going to be like 40 minutes before the listener knows what that is.
Yeah.
And that's awesome.
Isn't it going to be great? Yeah, so the opening, here's a real key sign that this was a bad podcast. I listened to it a little over a year ago, maybe 2-ish years ago. Yeah, I think it was the summer before last. I listened to this podcast. I was like, I need a podcast to talk about for this podcast. I'll talk about fairy. How did that podcast go?
Did you re-listen to it?
I re-listened to part of it.
Yeah.
And I read synopsis.
That is the
Spark notes.
Yeah, that's how you know you're like, I cannot bring myself to listen to
that's
this.
how you can tell it's bad. Because it's just not memorable at all. So, opening of the podcast. Imagine the most boring radio, nonfiction reporter you can think of.
Mm-hmm.
She opens this podcast exactly how you think, like a not quite true crime, but something similar would open, where she's like, everyone probably knows of fairy tales. You probably sat in your bed while your parents told you about them, but
the amount of condescendingness you have in your voice, you can't even
so
bring
bad.
yourself to open up your mouth all the way to say the terrible words that she said to you.
It's so bad. But then they do the thing that everyone is doing at this moment in history and time, where they're like, but you don't know the real fairy tales. Actually, Cinderella, her sisters cut off their toes, and actually, I don't remember what other example they say. Maybe something about Snow White.
Like the OG fairy tales and how they're
it was like Grimm's fairy tales,
cool.
and they're like, we've got this brand new thing you didn't know about, except everyone knows that Grimm's fairy tales were dark at this point. Everyone's done that.
Europeans were dark.
Everyone's done that. Everyone's like,
it's a dark, sad place.
Yeah,
the
original fairy
times, not
tales
fun.
were
Take
dark.
that one, Europe.
Yeah, Europe.
Yeah, Europe.
Yeah, you're being pillaged by the plague, and it sucks.
Yeah, suckers.
Yeah.
You know who didn't have plague?
Who?
Me.
Yeah.
You specifically.
The rats, they stayed away from you.
I was plague free.
Plague free.
No big pustules under my armpits.
Thanks for that visual.
That's how it worked, okay?
You don't need to remind us.
It's
how the
just
Black
accurate.
Death worked.
Yeah. But really boring, and that's their premise, is they're fae are darker than you think, and also they're real, but you have to go on. They bring up the dark web. No, not the dark web.
Yeah,
they bring up
dude.
they bring up a deep web forum within the first 15 minutes, and I'm like, dog.
I hope that exasperated table slap comes in through the audio.
The amount of times I'm going to be slamming my fist on the table.
So it's basically it's like a parody of one of those deep dive podcasts.
Yes.
But it's about nonsense and also a topic that is baseline not interesting. That is to say Fae folklore.
Well,
it's just introducing something that could be interesting.
Yeah.
It could be interesting if people who do stuff with modern iterations of Fae folklore with they had Spriggan in one of the titles of their episodes, so I was excited.
Is it a fairy? It's a little man.
It's a big man. It's also the thing about Fae folklore is listener, don't think I know all of the specifics. of it. I wish I did. I don't.
Honor actually is a fairy. Honor has a tiny little squeaky voice and little wings, and we just modulate her up.
Yeah. I mean, they won't know.
I don't gotta know.
You won't know.
Yeah.
Gamers, welcome back to the podcast. You remember Ocarina of Time?
Oh yeah.
Remember Navi?
Yeah. That's what honor is.
I
Just
don't,
put it in
so,
a bottle. And we shake it for the podcast.
It was fiction, but they pretended it wasn't fiction. It was really annoying. I hate you.
I don't know what you're talking about. I just wanted to leave that section in for the listener to hear what you normally sound like.
I hate Sam.
See, what you don't know, listener,
This
is
podcast
Honor
makes me
may
happy.
also be an assassin.
Yeah,
I
We'll
also
never know.
might be.
tiny little.
You'll
itty-bitty
find
fairy
out when it's
assassin.
me and
You'll never
Carly
see it
as the
coming.
hosts of this podcast.
Yeah, you know.
It was a good run. It was a good run.
It was
But
a good
yeah,
time.
Spriggan is like a guardian kind of spirit. A lot of the time their character is like having huge heads, at least from what I've seen,
Okay.
which like kind of sucks, but also kind of just like tree-ish. It's like vague. The thing about any kind of folklore is that there's going to be many iterations and it's going to be vague.
Right.
Which Fae definitely are, which leaves a lot of creative liberty.
And they
For,
took
like,
all that
interesting-
in this podcast?
No, is the thing. Is no. They were like, you can tell that because the thing is, they're like really. Their shtick is that it's like, this could be real. Like, they have
Sure.
actual sources. It's like the main character. Also, main character introduced and is like, the second person you hear on the podcast is this person who's like, I met Elliot Waters when I saved his life. Ad break. It's like,
What?
okay, cool. It's like real kind of clickbaity.
Yeah.
It's like if Jake Paul had a podcast.
And then it's
think he
like,
does.
he does.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
cool.
then it's like they talk to Elliot Waters and he just like kind of restates everything that she's already said, except it's like, oh, he's the source she got it from because he's like, I used to work for this branch of the government that interacts with fairies. But she already said all of that. So it's like, you could have just not done this whole thing.
That's so interesting to make a podcast like clickbaity because it's so
Yeah.
easy to make podcast content. Now, listener, this podcast is actually very difficult to make. We spend hours and years of our lives searching over the
Years.
tomes for the best
Yeah.
pods.
Yeah.
But it's like just have some ideas and then
Yeah.
say them, you know?
Yeah.
It's like if they looked at the acronym FBI and just went, instead of federal, what if it was, hear me out, fairy?
Fairy.
I feel like
No, the
you
thing
are
is,
100% on the money.
No, no, it's worse than that. They're like, it's a branch of the environmental division department, whatever,
the
right?
EPA.
Yeah. And it's just called the department.
Oh, heck yes!
Everything they do is like that. They're like, the veil is like they do nothing.
I know what they're trying to
They
get
do
at.
nothing.
Yeah.
Is that like, are they trying
yeah,
to
it's like
do a
the
Welcome
mist
to Night
from-
Vale situation?
Yeah, I was just thinking. Have either of you listened
kind
to
of-
Welcome to Night
I've
Vale?
listened to a
Yes.
very small amount. I want to listen to it.
Yeah, I think we should.
It's on my list.
Yeah.
We should do it.
But it does sound
But
like
yeah.
it's trying to create a spooky mythos,
Mm-hmm.
but also has no idea like
No.
what makes that mythos interesting,
No.
or like why calling something the department could be cool. But if everything is
Everything
so
is just the.
right, if it's so transparent, like the effect you're trying to create, and you don't have anything to actually add,
Yeah.
you're not
And it's
making anything.
like,
Yeah.
because they're trying to do fiction, but they want it to seem like nonfiction. And so every, like, failing of fiction they're taking on in their attempt to make it seem like nonfiction, and every failing of nonfiction is there because it's fiction and they're required to do other things. They're just not doing it well, which, like I said, they have more than one podcast, and I believe Fairy is their most recent. I believe they have one called, oh, what's their first one? I haven't actually listened to their first one, but from what I've seen, it's actually the better, like the best of their podcasts.
Okay.
that does sort of this same thing. They have another one called Rabbits, which I think the both of us should listen to because it's, again, that thing of like, this could be good, but they fall short on some key things. But it's like, this could be interesting of like, they put a lot of attention to detail into like, okay, this podcast could be set in the real world. They've got a lot of very specific stuff, but then they just, some things are just like super unsatisfying. But it's like, this could be interesting. This kind of like shtick you've got going. Yeah. But it, especially in Fairy, it's really poorly done. The ending sucks, by the way.
So there is an ending.
There is an ending. I was like, I don't remember how this podcast ended, and it's because there kind of is no ending.
Awesome.
In that they're just like, it's like the guy disappears and it's like in a flash of light and she gets like picked up by some forest rangers or whatever, and they're like, there were probably drugs, and she's like, well, now I don't know, are fairies real or was it drugs? And I'm like, you suck. She's also just super skeptical the whole time. Like, even in that finale, she is super skeptical when she's like, you know, his body is covered in tattoos and there's like strange sounds and lights and people have been like disappearing, but I really think it's just drugs and the human psychology. And I'm like, this is not interesting to hear you just like suck as a protagonist.
Have your bad trip on your own time.
Yeah. I'm like, there was no growth. There's none. There's nothing.
There's no resolution.
You did nothing. You had no interesting character traits except for just like not believing anything anyone says or like being interested, except you keep investigating. Why are you investigating if you just think none of this is real forever?
Listener, I would hate to be the person that made this podcast and look at Otter, because the looks I'm getting are frightening.
The thing is,
like, why did you show up today?
I am just like staring at you. The thing is, like I'm saying, it could have been good. I wish this podcast was good.
Because it's a topic you like.
It's a topic I like. I'm like, there's interesting things to do there. They started with like an interpretation of changelings where it's like they have more broad powers of like changing people's perception of reality. I'm like, okay, that could be cool. And then it just kind of like sucked. They just like didn't keep going. The Spriggans were just, I don't even remember. I think they were just like bodyguards, which like fine, but don't name the episode.
Big Muscly Men, episode 4. Is that what it is?
Awesome. Except the big muscly men are there for like 2 minutes.
Boo.
Boo. Give me more muscles.
It's just like a lot of nothing. All of the episodes are like 25 minutes, and every single one, I'm like, 5 of this is like the intro that's way too long, an ad run, and the rest of it could have also been 5 minutes.
So your review is 5 out of 5 stars?
No.
You love 10 out of 10 face?
My review is truly, I wish it had been good. That's truly how I feel about it. I wish it had been good.
I feel like somebody else made that review on like the Apple Podcasts.
For sure. I for sure have seen, because I also like, they do a really good job, especially Rabbits is their other podcast that I listened to before. And they do a lot better job of like really getting you hooked. It's really interesting. There's intriguing stuff going on, and so after that one I like looked into the reviews and stuff, and it was like, okay, other people feel the same way as me. Also true of Fairy, where people are like, this sucked.
It's that's kind of the consensus that this was not a good pod.
So that's my pod.
I'm very sorry, Anna, but guess
what?
what, I listened to an awesome podcast.
I'm so glad. Tell us about it, Sam.
I listened to an awesome podcast. My podcast is called the Star Wars Old Canon Book Club.
Whoa. Oh.
You know my thoughts about Star Wars.
I don't know your thoughts about Star Wars.
The pod doesn't know your thoughts about Star Wars.
Okay, listener. I'm gonna
go fast, though, because it's not a podcast.
Yeah. I'm going to go fast.
Yeah.
Talk.
Podpodcastcast instituting a rule. More than 30
Only
seconds
podcast.
on a non-podcast medium, you will be banned.
Yeah. Listener, in my defense, I've watched every single Star Wars movie because, like, my family loves Star Wars.
That's pretty good.
So you had a great time.
I don't like Star Wars because I just don't like the story. I don't like Westerner tropes. It's nothing against Star Wars itself. I'm a huge fan of Lego Star Wars. Love that shit.
Carly, you can't swear on the podcast even if it's about Lego Star Wars.
Make a swear
Insert
sound.
Taco Bell bong.
Make.
What?
Haven't you ever heard like the Taco Bell bong used?
Now you have to edit in the Taco Bell bong.
Yes.
I finished.
Oh, did you?
Yeah,
I wasn't
just
paying
said
attention.
I don't like Star Wars.
Sorry, I just like blinked out because of like the rage I was feeling or that you don't like Star Wars.
Like I said,
Because it's a wrong opinion. You're wrong for feeling that way.
my-
You as a person, your existence is wrong.
Okay,
I also
so
don't
funny
love
story.
Star
My
Wars,
brother and my
Carl.
dad
What?
have
Come
both
on.
said that.
Star Wars is
Actually, my
awesome.
favorite movie that I ever watched was Star Wars, aside from like Empire Strikes Back, because you kind of have to like it
Yeah, it's a great
if you
movie.
like cinema.
Wait.
Solo, which is a hot take.
You like Solo? Or
Did
don't
you just
like?
say
Solo's a
your
good movie.
favorite movie you ever watched was a Star Wars movie, but you don't like Star Wars?
No, that was my favorite
It's
of the Star Wars
yeah.
movies I
Oh,
watched.
I understand.
No, it doesn't even crack the top 10.
I mean, yeah, that makes sense because you said you didn't like it.
No.
Hey, Honor, can I take a quick tangent on my review to review something else really quickly?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think Carly as a person is whack.
No,
My rating for
I
Carly.
don't allow this.
My rating for Carly is W
no.
for whack.
I do deserve
W
whack because
for
I also
win.
don't like peanut butter listener.
I'm adjusting my review. My review for Carly is double W. Whack and weird.
No, it's whack and wacko.
You're
It's
whack
just the
wacko.
Podpodcastcast version of whack.
Yeah, the whack whack.
Whack whack.
I listen to Star Wars Old Canon Book Club. Star Wars Old Canon Book Club is a podcast by Jesse Cox, Alex Fasciani, and Davis. I don't know Davis's last name. I always assumed Davis's last name was Davis.
Maybe.
It might be Michael Davis. I don't
Go
know.
with it.
He is simply
Sure.
credited as Davis. So I do love Star Wars as opposed to Carly. So in 2012, I think, Disney bought Lucasfilms from George Lucas for gobs of money.
Yeah.
And when they did that, they were like, we're going to make our own movies. And they wanted them to be in the Star Wars canon, right? So the official story of Star Wars. Well, the problem with that is that the Star Wars canon was very full. So after, most people know the movies, but after the movies came out, George Lucas was like, hey, if you want to write books, great. You pay me some money. I'll lend you the license, right? So there's this huge expanded universe, right? Of all these books, all these stories. I think the timeline goes 60 years plus outside of the Return of the Jedi, right? Originally the last movie. And so people write all these books and all these stories. Disney buys it, and they're like, nope, none of that's real anymore. Forget it. Forget all those things that you read and liked.
That's so cool.
And so now Disney's doing the same thing. And so they're releasing all kinds of media, and they, especially where they're doing other stuff now with Star Wars, but they were releasing a bunch of media about what happens after Return of the Jedi, famously the sequel trilogy, which is not my favorite. Anyway, so when that happened, when Disney bought Star Wars from Lucasfilms, Jesse Cox, Alex Fasciani, and Davis started a podcast called the Star Wars New Canon Book Club, in which they were going to read and consume all of the Star Wars new canon that Disney was putting out there. And that started in I think maybe it didn't start in 2012, maybe 2015 when the first new Star Wars movie came out, or shortly before that. And I loved that podcast. Jesse Cox and the other two I think are all YouTubers, but I got in it through Jesse Cox because I was a big fan of his, and I ate it up as somebody who was too dumb to read but liked Star Wars. It was fun. They would tell me what happened, and I said, "Oh yay!" But most of the time, they were like, "These books are very bad."
Yeah.
Not most of kind of most of the time. It was a sad hopefulness that they always had. They're like, well, maybe the next one will be good, and it never was.
Yeah.
Then December 2020, they go dark. They had been reviewing The Mandalorian, and then they just never come back. And it was very sad. They had done this a couple times before, and I was like, I'm missing my Star Wars boys, and they've come back again this year or last year to the Star Wars Old Canon Book Club. So now it's not.
That sounds better.
It is. It is better.
I've seen the comics. It's pretty better.
It sounds very cool. So they've done. I think the first episode was July of last summer, and so basically what they're doing is they're like, okay, the new canon made us sad. Let's go back to the old canon. So they're going to consume every piece of Star Wars media from the beginning in the order that it came out.
Nice.
Ooh,
Yes.
That should be fun.
It is very fun. It's super cool to see how Star Wars has evolved as a big Star geek myself. So they start off, the very first episode is about Star Wars, the novel by George Lucas, which is not written by George Lucas, which is awesome, but it is called Star Wars by George Lucas.
That's funny.
Yeah. And so basically, George Lucas handed a screenplay over to this writer, and he writes this novel, which is essentially the movie. This is how they did it, back in the 70s when, like, a movie was not out for very long.
Yeah.
And so you could, you would, if you really liked a movie, instead of buying a DVD, you would go buy a book, a paperback. But this guy writes this, beautiful novel, and like adds a lot of other descriptions and ideas that like influence others, like Star Wars media later down the road. It's so interesting to hear. Like, there's one book that is never talked about again, kind of, called Splinter of the Mind's Eye, that explores this adventure that Luke and Leia have together on this crazy wackadoo planet when they fight Darth Vader, and they use like imagine if instead of a normal lightsaber battle, they had like a battle from Dragon Ball Z. It was awesome. If you don't know what that is, listener, it's goofy. That's what it is.
It's goofy.
And so it's I love this podcast because I love Star Wars, and it's so interesting to like go back to the roots as like a historical thing, but it's also like this is just more of like the Star Wars that I love. And what's great is that all the hosts, I like really enjoy, hearing how like their feelings on all this stuff. They're, a generation of two ahead of me in the Star Wars fandom, so they remember when all this was like these kinds of books and stuff were coming out. Not the original ones. They're not. They came up in the 90s, right? So there's a bunch of books that come out in the 90s that they loved.
Gotcha.
But I never got to experience this. Like, I never like read the original Star Wars comics. I probably wouldn't have. They seem all equally crazy.
Yeah, they're wacky.
But it's just really cool, and it's also cool to like share with people like why I love Star Wars. They talk about a lot of Star Wars, especially in this early kind of embryonic form, is like it just feels like such an interesting setting. They talk about it like a setting for a like a Dungeons and Dragons campaign.
Yeah.
It's a world that you don't know anything about, but that already feels real, and that you want to go explore. You want to go tell your own story in some corner of.
Yeah.
That's the stuff that I loved doing in my backyard when I was like 3 foot high.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Honestly, that is like I like Star Wars in that exact way. I like the setting and the aesthetic and the atmosphere.
Right.
The actual stories I really can't tell you that much about.
Yeah.
Han Solo's cool.
He's a cool guy.
He's
He's like a space.
He's like a
He's space
space cowboy.
space
But
cowboy.
yeah, the way
Yeah.
you described it was like why my brother and my dad love it is because they have like that connection with it. Because my brother, when did the it's the
2015.
prequels.
So yeah, the first prequel comes out in 1999, and then the first sequel comes out in 2015. If that's what you're thinking.
So he was born and kind of like his childhood was after the prequels were like already released, but like that was the newest stuff, so he was still attached to it. But my dad remembers like when the original trilogy was coming out, and like he would talk about coming back from Boy Scout camp, and like that would be the exciting thing.
What a beautiful period of history to have been born in.
Yeah.
You could imagine going to the theater, opening night, Empire Strikes Back. There's laser battles, there's love,
My dad talks
there's
about
drama,
Yeah, he talked
a
about
revelation.
seeing Raiders of the Lost Ark for the first time.
Yeah, I'm okay on Indiana Jones, but I could see how he would like it. It's fine. No, it's fine. It's Indiana Jones is not that, it's not that whole universe that I
They
love,
didn't put
but-
it in space.
No,
Well,
it's not in
hey.
space, but I gotta love it because history.
Okay, man.
Listeners do know that Carly pounded her chest
Yeah.
and to demonstrate her fealty to the field of history.
Yes. You gotta have some coolness in our discipline.
Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
Indiana Jones is what the history nerds get.
It's about as cool as we get.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Wonder Woman, she's technically a historian.
Sure. I thought you just meant like this is a movie that has history in it.
Yeah.
And Wonder Woman has history in it because she's a lady. She was one of those ladies I saw.
She was a woman.
She was a woman.
She
Yeah,
actually worked at the Louvre.
she did. And then in the new movie, she was sad and didn't have a TV.
I forget
Yeah.
like that movie got released.
Good.
Don't listen
Stay
to it,
that
listener.
way.
It's bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, if you like Star Wars, I would really recommend listening to the Star Wars Old Canon Book Club
Mm.
and going back and listening to the new book club. If you like the boys, they're very fun. So,
Yeah.
I'm gonna give them. I'm gonna give them a 4 out of Millennium Falcons because
Nice.
Pretty good.
they're not regular, and it's the most. I've listened to the thing they released at the start of the month.
Mm-hmm.
And they may not release again for like 5 more months. And if they don't, I might do my So
Nice.
it's a good
I
pod.
actually have a recommendation for you. Did you know that they ran a radio drama of, I believe, the original Star Wars trilogy? And who plays Luke Skywalker?
Mark Hamill.
They have him
Whoa!
on it. Yeah,
But
it's like
old?
good. Well, it's because it's original Luke. So it's from like the 90s or whatever.
Oh,
Okay.
sure. Yeah. He's still,
But it's like
he's
the
middle-aged.
Still
original
baby
trilogy, I believe, but like more expanded. It might be based on the books, kind of. But I listened to a little bit of it for class. It's like the atmosphere and stuff is really good. You might like it.
I could like it.
Same as on
I think it's like 8
I
hours long.
I enjoy getting homework in this podcast.
Yeah.
Carly, what have you been listening to?
Carly.
So I've been listening to a lot. I was struggling to like find this podcast. I mean, what do I talk about on the infamous Podpodcastcast? And then I realized
I'm glad you were taking this seriously.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
this journalistic endeavor. I'm glad you were taking it
Yeah.
seriously.
Oh yeah, I had to narrow it down because listener, I listen to some true crime, you know? You just need some good old-fashioned true crime.
I forgot that.
Boo.
I also like to listen to just like nerdy stuff like let's talk about Greek mythology. That's fun.
Mm.
Quieter, boo.
Hey, Greek mythology's cool.
Greek mythology's fine.
But
We'll come to my prejudices against true crime at some point. This may lose us all
Yeah.
our listeners.
I mean, I'm with you, so.
I had to pick the pinnacle. And
The-
so it was between two podcasts.
Okay.
And they're both from Wood Elf Productions.
Wood Elf Productions.
Yeah.
Famous
Wood
American
Elf
production
Productions.
studio.
Yeah, famous American production studio, and it's hosted partially on both podcasts by the infamous Mark E. Plier. So it was either going to be let go my favorite sports team, or I had to talk about Distractable.
To be clear,
Distractable.
Mark E. Plier is Markiplier, famed YouTuber
famed
Mark
YouTuber.
Fishbacher.
Markiplier.
Is that right?
Mark
Fishbacher?
Fishbach.
He should change his name to Bacher.
No.
He changed his name to Markiplier
Yeah.
on the internet.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever. That's a weird name.
Bruh. Anyway, so I just Distractable, and you know, it's a fun little podcast that you can listen to. It has all sorts of topics, and I like podcasts like as much as I love the story ones where
Yeah.
you like follow characters.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
I also just like people talking in the background. And like I said, I kind of got used to that with living in a larger room with 5 other people and 0 space. So, you know, listening to some people just randomly talk about what they would have at their funeral and how to put the fun back in it
Yeah,
was
buddy.
really nice, you know? Talking about fridge problems? Sign me up. Like,
That is the classic episode.
Yeah.
Who's on the pod?
so it is hosted by 3 hosts, and like how it's set up is it's a competition every episode. So it's hosted by Wade, Bob, and then Mark. Now it's Bob Meiskin and then Wade
I don't
Barnes.
remember. Barnes?
I think.
I
I
wouldn't
will
know.
look it up on my little
Yeah,
machine.
double check me.
Get on your little machine.
And then of course Mark Fishbach. And every episode is like a competition for who can come up with the funniest, goofiest, most crazy answers, and it's on a point system. And so it's fun because you're trying to find like the funniest thing, and it's very
It is Wade Barnes. That is correct. Actually, his name is George Wade Barnes, according
Whoa.
to Wikitubia, which does feel like an invasion of privacy. Heyo.
yeah. Yeah, so you know, they have a topic, and then whoever's hosting, the host of the episode is the winner from the previous one. So it carries over. And so they get to host, and then they come up with the topic, and then the other 2 hosts that aren't like the lead of the discussion are going to come up with fun answers. So, and now Bob's Fridge is like a great place to start.
Yeah,
but it breaks the cycle because it's just Bob talking about fridge problems.
Oh, it's not even part of the competition. He just talks about his day.
Yeah, because Mark, what is it? Concedes. Because he's like, I can't fight with this.
It's awesome.
And it is hilarious. He talks about how like a pipe got broken. And then another really good one that I liked is Hold My Beer. That's a really great episode where it was just like Mark talked about like funny parkour things that he did in college. And then
I didn't know that about him.
Yeah. And then there's another episode. I forgot what the name is, but it's like Bob and Mark talking about stories from college because they were both roommates in college. And then it's like the bunk bed. Because every time I think of the bunk bed.
The bunk bed.
And how it was held up by a single like piece of a hanger.
Yeah, they like cut up a hanger and then they use it as like a peg.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful.
It's so beautiful.
But it's kind of one of those like BSing podcasts. It's like what we talked about last episode, Chuckle Sandwich.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of just
extremely similar.
Yeah. It's a podcast where it's that like me and my bros are really funny when we talk. We should make a podcast.
Yeah.
But it's done by very successful YouTubers.
Yeah,
and
that's what I was gonna say.
Quite funny.
You just went. It's just random people talking. It's not random people talking. It's incredibly successful entertainers.
Yeah, but like successful and funny people.
It's
that know
Markiplier
improv
and his friends.
Comedic timing
right.
As well.
Yeah, I've listened to Distractable. There is no form, you know. The competition system is a lie. It's all arbitrary.
It's just them like laughing at each other, and most of the time they have like stuff in like the intro that's like sometimes the funniest part of the episode, and it has nothing to do with like what they would actually get to talk about.
Yeah,
in the main
well, because
part.
they talk because they have a fun man do the intro.
Yeah,
it's like welcome to Distractible,
the Wood Elf
Productions.
Yeah, and. You know, you just pop that on, listen to some funny people. Because I would do that when they did Three Peens in a Podcast, where they would like play games, and it was basically like their podcast. And just, I would have like the craziest things on in the background, and they would be like working on Satisfactorio, and I would just be doing my math homework.
I like that you combined Satisfactory and also Factorio.
Yeah.
The gamers will appreciate that I corrected you.
Yeah. I promise I'm a gamer. I play Sudoku on my phone. Don't worry. I play games. Don't worry.
Play games.
Yeah, games, but no games.
Nice.
No.
Good pull.
That is not a good reference and will not be included.
Good pull.
No,
you have to.
Bad.
You got
bad.
it.
If you don't understand the reference, I'm proud of
Listen
you.
to the Podpodcastcast episode about Chuckle Sandwich.
Did we talk about
You
the
better
question?
have talked about that bit.
What question?
Games.
Sam,
games.
Would you rather have unlimited bacon?
You definitely talked about it based off of that reaction.
But no games.
Listen to that episode. Don't remind me. It's dumb.
It's not dumb.
It's awesome.
Dumb. What do you mean?
I don't
it's
think
not?
we did talk
okay,
about
Carly,
it.
you can enjoy it, but don't you come to my freaking PG-13 podcast and tell me it's not dumb.
It's not dumb.
It's
I will
really
die
dumb.
on that hill. It is not dumb.
It's absolutely.
It's
dumb.
funny.
It's up there. I just like goofy
It's
people
funny.
talking because, you know, in between like my music that I listen to on Spotify, you know, you throw on a podcast and just listen to
Hold on. Like throw an episode in like in the queue with your music?
No,
Honor almost shut down at the thought of that.
I've seen people do that on their playlist, and I'm like, what monster? You have to pick between podcast or music.
It's gotta be one or the other.
One or the other. No.
Yeah.
I will pick a day where I'm like, it's a distractible day. I'm going to listen to it as I'm walking to class, you know?
But
Yeah.
how much do you tune them out? Like, you're doing this while you're working. You're doing this while you're doing other stuff. Like, it's perfect for, like, that tune-out podcast. But is it, like, 90%?
I would say it's about 75 to 25%.
Tune-outable?
Yeah, I mean, like certain episodes, like I completely tune out. But
Sure.
if it's like a good one, you got to get like a good bit going, and then I will tune in more. But like some of them, I was like, as much as I thought the conventions episode was fun, I tuned that out a lot.
I did not listen to that podcast, but I do know this phenomenon tremendously. I have listened to them on like the long car ride home, and there's some episodes where it's, you know, there's just no match. There's
Yeah.
no spark. There's nothing that like gets
No.
lit, and it's like, okay,
You need a
this is
good bit.
fine. It's enjoyable, but it's not like those episodes that you're talking about that
Yeah.
are super.
You need the good
Entertain-
ones. It's like Chuckle Sandwich. Sometimes I'll tune out Chuckle Sandwich because I'm like, okay, they're just talking. But the good episodes, I tune in and I listen to those. And I also like
Yeah,
to listen
buddy.
with
Are there
to them with video because then
There we-
visual
Are
effects.
there distractible clips? We've been talking about clips recently here on the podcast.
Yes.
Do you watch the clips?
Yes.
They
It's
do
maybe
get
the
them
clip-
animated sometimes.
The
have
animated
se-
ones are funny.
I have seen the animated ones. That's an animated podcast is a beautiful thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love those. That's how I learned about Go My Favorite Sports Team was because
Yeah.
of the football animated one, and I thought that was hilarious.
Right, which is the other podcast that he does. I
Yes.
also know Wood Elf from two other podcasts,
Mhm.
which is the Jax Films podcast. I don't know what it's called. Jax Films, another YouTuber, and then a certain Australian podcast network, Sans Pants Radio, has. Well, I guess it's not. They formerly had a podcast called. What the heck is that podcast called?
I don't remember.
Oh, Baseless Speculation. Baseless Speculation was a Sans Pants Radio podcast, but now it's a Wood Elf podcast hosted by the exact same people. So now it's an
Wow.
American podcast,
Whoa.
which is what they always say. They're like, "Welcome to this American podcast," in their Australian accents. It's beautiful.
Well,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
But I haven't been listening to Distractable recently because
the controversy,
not the controversy.
because all those terrible things that he said.
yeah.
Oh, no. I've been listening to a different podcast for another controversy on the internet. How familiar are you guys with the JoJo Siwa Karma music video?
Not
What
at
is
all.
happening right now? I thought we were on
Yeah, I have
off track.
no
I thought
clue.
we were like, and we're on a ramp down, back into normalcy.
Yeah.
The
No.
pop-
I've been listening to Call Me Daddy and to that specific episode where she interviews JoJo Siwa because I want to know what's going on.
See, I would have been really confused, but I recently learned about Call Me Daddy, which is the Spotify's most listened to podcast among women.
Really?
Yes, it's
Whoa.
an interview podcast by some person I've never seen before.
Nor have I.
I think it's called Call Her Daddy. Is that
Yeah,
what you-
Call Her Daddy and
is what the podcast is called.
yeah, I got turned on in my friend's car because they'd been listening to Karma by JoJo Siwa. Don't
Okay.
listen to it.
Is it a song?
It is a song.
Okay.
There's also a music video.
Interesting.
The music video is disturbing for a reason.
Is Podpodcastcast bringing the people current events?
Yeah, am I breaking news right
guess.
now?
It won't be current when you listen to this, listener, but it's
No.
current for us.
Yeah. So to break it down, it's like disturbing in the sense that she's humping the ground. I watched that on my 20th birthday.
What a terrible birthday.
Yeah, that's how I started my morning. Was with that JoJo Siwa music.
What?
Video.
Did someone like thrust to say, they're like, you need to see this.
Yes. my
You're a
roommate,
man now, Carly.
She turned it on.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and she came out of the water looking like a gator version of like a Kiss singer. You know, like the metal band.
What? Okay, this sounds awesome, actually.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
does sound rad.
Oh, if only you had like a clip format to like show it, but it's also copyrighted.
No.
But yeah, so
Pod-
my friend turned
podcast.
on
Podcast only.
podcast only.
No clip.
But I listened to that episode because she talks about some concerning things. I hope she like gets out of this phase and gets help.
Oh, she does look weird. That's interesting.
So that's what I've been listening to. You can cut this all out. This
I
is so
can,
off
and I
topic.
might, but it's also interesting that when you look up JoJo Siwa Karma video,
Oh yeah.
the video does not come up.
Nice.
Safe search.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
Is that it? Maybe
it-
that's it.
It is disturbing. It's concerning.
JoJo. Oh, by the way, for anyone who's still listening to this, JoJo Siwa was the actor on a child's TV show. She was
she
very.
was on Dance
Mhm.
Moms, and then she was a Nickelodeon
This is a
kid.
lyrics video. I hate this.
It's weird because I know that the docu-series All Quiet on Set has been talking about like some of the stuff that went down in the early 2000s and the 90s with Dan Schneider. This will be surprising. She's in the post Dan Schneider version of Nickelodeon. The era after him.
So the era when it's better.
Question mark?
Yeah.
But the stuff she's doing seems like it
Worse.
She's trying to have her Miley Cyrus face.
Um,
It's fine.
Carly, how would you rate Distractable And then how would you rate Karma, a music video by JoJo Siwa?
I would rate Distractable. Oof. What's a good rating system for Distractable? I'm gonna call it 7.5 fridges.
Look up the fridge episode, listener.
Please listen
It's
to
a good
Bob's
one.
Fridge.
Bob's Fridge is pretty good.
It's a great intro into Distractable because it's like just
They
it's
got
just
that
them
one.
talking about random.
It's the
They
best
got
one.
that one animated, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
it's very
And
good.
Go on
but you
Mark-
don't get the whole
Go on
story.
Markiplier's channel. The animateds are on Mark's channel, right?
Yes, they're all Mark's channel.
Go to
if you
Markiplier.
wanna-
Go to Bob's Fridge.
Yeah. Or just get
It'll
any
be
of the clips
funny.
if you're not 100%
Thanks for that
sure.
URL, Otter.
Yeah. YouTube.com/Markiplier.
And then how would you rate? What was it called?
JoJo Siwa
Gator? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I would say
Karma.
0 gators out of I can't even say the main lyric because there's cursing. So karma's a bad word. I should have known better.
That's not even... What? That's the chorus?
No, the chorus is karma's a bitch. And I should have known.
No, I know. I got that. I just thought that was still lame.
That's what it is. Listen, actually, Sam listened to Karma after this.
I will.
episode.
I'll go listen to it.
Yeah, I want to watch your reaction.
And you know what we're all going to listen to right now? The great listeners of Podpodcastcast, because they emailed us at podpodcastcastpod@gmail.com.
Yes.
And listener, you can too. Email us at podpodcastcastpod@gmail.com.
Yeah,
I'm not going to spell it because it's too many letters.
Too many.
But email us and we'll read it on the air. We want to know your thoughts. Please tell us.
Yeah.
We have this email with subject, Hi.
Hi. Hello.
Dearest Podpodcastcast crew, first things first. I think in a fight, Honor would both... I think in a fight, Honor would both kill both Sam and Brady in an instant.
Oh, that
Yeah,
is
buddy.
factual statement.
That being said, I'm excited to listen to this podcast. I don't get to listen to them very often, and they're really but they're really lovely to listen to while drawing. So I'm hopeful that listening to this one will actually get me back into my art again. I've been really excited for this podcast ever since I heard it was on its way. So it's really, really great to finally get to listen to it. So far, I'd give this podcast a solid 10 meows out of 10.
10 meows.
From Little Kitty Cat, parentheses, meow meow.
Little kitty cat.
Wow.
In my brain, this is dropped on like the porch like a mouse.
Yeah, and that's...
Or a squirrel.
I did not
That's a
know that cats could put pods in their ears. Their big old ears. Their ears are too big.
Yeah.
And listen to us.
What's wrong with little
If you're a
cats?
cat, could you, and you're listening to this, could you turn yourself in, please?
Yeah.
Turn yourself into the fairy department.
We are glad that we have the fairy department.
No, just the department.
Just the department, I'm sorry.
Turn yourself into the department.
They can't get confused with the FBI. You would get
The
weird, weird
feline
crossover.
business.
Yeah.
Isotopes. No. I tried so much.
You tried.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, little kitty cat, even though it made me feel really weird to say that.
I feel like that's a you problem. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, skill issue.
And we have another email with subject line in regards to the Dust episode. Hello there, Honor and Sam of the esteemed Podpodcastcast podcast.
Hello.
I'm going to read this in the way it was intended to be read.
Uh-huh.
Laser projector, you type G galactic whale falls. Sincerely, all vegans.
Oh,
Carly does not know what that's
Yeah,
about.
know.
What happened? I feel like I
We
missed
made the
some stuff.
vegans mad, and
We made the vegans
you know,
mad.
I think we should be congratulated. They were getting
We
it
should.
too easy.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah,
how did you make the
vegans, whale fall yourself.
Well, for yourself, vegans.
You know,
Yeah.
the vegans need to toughen up.
If you didn't listen to that,
Precisely.
the Dust episode,
Go back
maybe
and
do that.
listen to it.
But this is suffice to say, they did not like what we had to say about the vegan community.
No.
Oh, I can't wait.
Well, listener, email into podpodcastcastpod@gmail.com. You're absolutely allowed to do that. But what you have to do, what you should do, and what would make us so happy. Can you
He's
hear me-
smiling.
Can you hear me smiling?
He's smiling so big.
give us a rate, give us a review, give us a follow on your podcast platform of choice. And there's only 3 that this is on, unless you're finding a secret 4th. Ooh, good on you. The Apple Podcasts, the Spotify, and then the Amazon Music. If anyone uses that, I don't think they do.
I don't think
I'm
it
Our
sorry.
analytics say it's not real.
Yeah. If you're using Apple Music at this stage in the game, I'm sorry.
Apple Music? Well, I
Apple
use Apple
Podcasts.
Podcasts. I use Apple Podcasts.
What?
I'm a big Apple Podcast head.
Carly, you're always talking about your freaking Apple ecosystem.
Yeah, but
You
I
can't say
am a
anything.
strict Spotify user.
You can't talk.
Privilege.
I mean, I like my Apple ecosystem. I like it, but
And you-
Spotify's better.
And Carly, you know what we like? We liked having you on, despite all the problems, all the
Despite-
terrible opinions you had.
Controversy is
We-
coming.
We will not
Yay,
have you back
Carly.
until you start enjoying Star Wars. How have you? This is mind-boggling to me.
Are we gonna continue on this tangent?
No, because I'm kicking out of the studio. I'm turning on the lights. Oh, did you like that sound effect, listener?
Very
We
good.
did Foley.
Wow.
Carly, thanks for coming on. Honor, thanks for joining me on this wonderful, the best episode so far of Podpodcastcast.
Thank you for joining me, Sam.
Thanks for joining me. And remember,
for having
listeners,
me.
what we always say.
Pod.
Away!